Never walk into the Dollar Tree and see those small foam pumpkins and think, these are all right, but I wish that they were cuter and matched my decor. Well, I'm going to give you 10 different ideas on how to change up those pumpkins to match your style and decor on a small budget. Hi, I'm Sarah with Jujube DIY. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to get right into this video and I'm going to show you those 10 ideas now. For our first DIY, I created some texture paste. I got the recipe from our Upcycled Life. I'll leave the link to her channel and the recipe down below. But I created it in this little container and I wanted to pipe it onto my pumpkin. So I am going to put it into a plastic bag and then I'm going to cut a very small spot off of the corner of the bag to create a very small hole that I can pipe our texture paste through. I painted my pumpkin white with Waverly chalk paint and then I put a skewer in it so that I could hold my pumpkin easier and turn it. Now I am just going to pipe on a design of my choosing. Now, if you want to go ahead and mark out a design ahead of time with a pencil, you can do that, or you can just get creative and do what you like. Just make sure that you don't go on the bottom of your pumpkin, otherwise your pumpkin will not set or stand easily. So I just did half of the pumpkin at a time, and then I went in with my heat tool and I decided to give it a little blast with the heat gun just to make sure that it was nice and dry before going on to the next section. You can pipe all the way up to the top, but remember you're going to add a stem here, so you may not want to go all the way up to that hole, but add texture paste anywhere you want on your pumpkin and then let it dry fully. So I would say 24 hours. And then I'm going to go in with this beautiful pink sky from Waverly. This is one of their new colors. I gave it 2 coats of that. And then I went in with the pink dusk. So these are complementary. They were meant to go together. And I am just going to dry brush this darker pink color all over those raised bumps. And as you can see, that texture just comes out beautifully. So I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way around this pumpkin. Now, once I am done doing that, I added my stem, which I will show you how to do here in just a few minutes. But I'm going to decorate the top of this with some greenery that I picked up at Michael's and a couple of the little flowers from the Dollar Tree. I think they're called grass something filler. They come out in the fall, so they should be available here soon. The colors just went really well with my pumpkin theme. Now this pumpkin was sitting a little funky. It wasn't because I had texture paste at the bottom, it just wasn't sitting flat. So I'm going to take a small round circle, wood circle that I have, and I'm going to glue it to the bottom. And as you can see, it doesn't even show, and I love how this pumpkin turned out. I love that texture, and I just think it's beautiful. All right, for our second pumpkin, I painted it white with the Waverly chalk paint, and then I'm going to take some raffia that I had from the Dollar Tree. I grabbed about 4 or 5 strands and I just twisted it together, and I'm going to hot glue that to my pumpkin along all of those segments around. So I'm going to keep gluing and then cutting off the top, and this is how it will look when it's completely done. And originally I was going to glue the raffia strips into the middle of the pumpkins, but once I got started on that, I realized that it wasn't working out so well. So after searching around and thinking about what I wanted to do, I found this lace ribbon from the Dollar Tree in my stash, and I thought it would look beautiful. So I'm going to start off with this section at the top, and I am going to glue down a little bit, pushing that in the corners, and then I'm going to glue it down, and then I'll kind of turn it, flip it up, and then I will go down the middle and then finally down the other side. Just make sure that you're using plenty of hot glue and twisting it so that it is as thin as possible at those corners. Now, if you were going to do this project, you would probably start off with your ribbon first and then go in with your raffia afterwards. But since this was kind of an afterthought, I am going kind of in the opposite direction that I would normally go. Now that I've got it all covered with ribbon and my stem done, I'm going to add some lamb's ear to the top of my stem for some decoration. And I'm just using some of the smaller leaves. This is the lamb's ear that comes from Walmart. And again, I'll show you in the next segment how to make that stem. Then I'm going to finish it off with a raffia bow. And here is a look at this one. I think this looks so cute. It's kind of boho, kind of chic, and I just love it. Today's video is a collaboration with some awesome women on YouTube. It is being hosted by my sweet friend Favi from Arrows DIY, and we are joining Michelle from Moxie Java DIY, Ellie at DIY from House to Home, Emily from Farm Charm Chic, and Sandra from DIY at the Schwoben's Nest, and of course me. I will leave a link to the playlist down below. Everyone is doing a pumpkin flip and they are going to be gorgeous. I can't wait to see what everyone's made. So make sure that you go check out the collaboration playlist to see what all of these wonderful and talented ladies have done with their pumpkins. All right, on with the show. For this DIY, I painted one of the pumpkins white with chalk paint, and then I found this gorgeous scarf, infinity scarf at the Dollar Tree. And I just thought that this would make a beautiful pumpkin. So I'm going to cut off a piece of this fabric that will wrap around the entire pumpkin. And I will just cut off that section. And then of course you have lots of scarf left over to create other wonderful projects with. So I originally was going to Mod Podge the fabric onto my pumpkin, and I was just having a really hard time with it. So I decided, you know what? I know hot glue works. I'm just going to hot glue it down. So I ran a bead of hot glue down one of the seams of the pumpkin, and then I just pulled it nice and tight and hot glued the other end down on that same seam. And now I'm just going to cut off some of the fabric. Now, I cut this end a little too short, and I'd already done this pumpkin like 3 times trying to get this figured out. So definitely cut it longer and then just poke a hole at the end and shove the fabric down into the hole. You don't have to even glue the ends at all. It will save you time and it'll look a lot nicer. So once I got it all attached and glued down, now I'm going to take some jute twine and I'm going to wrap it around the pumpkin in those areas where it goes in, you know, like the little pumpkin divots. I don't know what those sections, I don't know what they're called, but I'm going to wrap that jute twine around each of the sections twice. And then I'm going to take a lighter to burn off all of those little edges. And as you can see at the bottom, I added a little stand just wrapping the jute twine around and around until it created a circle. And that just makes it a little more stable for my pumpkin. Now here is the tutorial on how to do those pumpkin stems that I've been showing in the first couple of DIYs on my video. I found this idea on Pinterest, and I will link the original blog, or at least the original blog that I found, down below. But I thought that this was such a great idea, and I just loved the way it looked, and I thought this would be a really fun and easy way to step up those plastic pumpkin stems from the Dollar Tree. So I'm going to take some of the nautical rope from the Dollar Tree. This just happens to be the smaller width one or circumference, but you could use the bigger one. All you're going to do is separate out those individual strands, and then you're going to glue them kind of together. I found that this was easier for me to just pre-glue the 4 strands together. And I like to do it in the 4 strands because I think that as you're gluing it around the base of that pumpkin stem that is the original pumpkin stem, that it kind of creates that almost, you know how like the stem comes out of those segments? It almost kind of looks that same way. So you're going to keep gluing those 4 strands all the way around until your entire stem is covered. And now you've got a fun hairy mess at the top of your pumpkin, but don't worry, we're going to fix that. So I added a little bit of glue to my pumpkin stem, the existing pumpkin stem, and I am not being too careful about making sure that it's all glued down. I'm just going to kind of see where I need that extra coverage, basically. So it's not completely, I'm not gluing all of those strands down to the pumpkin stem, but I'm gluing some of them down because I don't want that pumpkin stem to show. So I'm going to glue down where I think it needs to be glued, and then I'm going to kind of twist it. Now I'm going to trim it down as long as I want my pumpkin stem to be, and I'm going to do this at an angle. This will just make it look more natural, and it will make it look almost like it broke off from the pumpkin vine or that it was ripped off, and I think it just gives a more natural look. And now we're going to go in with some Mod Podge. So if you want to, definitely use some gloves for this. I don't mind getting a little messy. So I'm just going to put the Mod Podge onto the fibers there, onto that nautical rope, and I'm going to twist and coat all of those individual strands pretty well with the Mod Podge. Now you're going to have to kind of hold this for just a few minutes because as soon as you let go, it starts to kind of unravel, and you want that kind of twisted look. And that's just because that's kind of, if you've looked at a pumpkin stem in real life, they kind of have that textured, twisted look a little bit. So you definitely want to kind of hold it. It doesn't take too long. You're seeing me do this in live time, and this is pretty much all I did with it. So I let that set and dry, and then I'm going to go in and dry brush just different colors of browns and greens onto my stem, and look at how wonderful that looks. Does that look real? Like, I'm pretty impressed with how good this looks. It's easy, it's not too time consuming, and it really steps up the look of those Dollar Tree pumpkins. So now I created a tassel, added some beads in green and white, and I'm just going to tie that to the top of my pumpkin to finish this one off. And here is a look at how it turned out. I think this one definitely gives off a boho vibe, and I love it. All right, moving on to our next DIY. I'm going to take a napkin from the Dollar Tree. I picked this one up last year, so I hope they have something similar this year, but I liked that kind of design at the bottom, and that's what I'm going to use for this pumpkin. So I'm going to cut this out, and I'm kind of fussy cutting or getting kind of close to that design with my scissors and just going with the natural curve of it. And then I need to separate that napkin out. So the Dollar Tree napkins tend to be 2-ply. Some of the more expensive napkins you'll find might be 4-ply, but you just kind of separate it out. And all I did was I just wet my fingers a tiny bit, got them a little bit damp, and then pushed them together, my thumb and my first finger together, to get those napkins to separate. Now I counted the segments on my pumpkin. I had 8, so I did that 8 times. Now I'm going to put a layer of Mod Podge down onto my painted white pumpkin, and I'm going to start adding those strips to the center of each of the segments. Now I am being very gentle here. I want to press that napkin down gently. If you rub on it, it will break or separate from itself. So definitely take your time, pat it down, and if you need to add a little water to your finger to make it smooth, you can do that. And this is how it looks when it is all dried. I love how this one turned out. It was definitely better than I expected. And I just added a bit of Mod Podge around the whole entire pumpkin to protect it. Now I have this stem in my stash. This was from a large pick that I picked up at Michael's. It was like a hydrangea pick. And I just cut off the end of it, made a perfect pumpkin stem. But you can use a stick for this part if you'd like, or you can create whatever kind of stem you want. And then I'm going to go around each of the little divot sections with different colored baker's twine. So this is baker's twine I picked up from the Dollar Tree, and I did orange, yellow, green, and brown. And I'll just do that to each of the segments. And now that that's done, I'm going to cover my stem with some jute twine. So I'll just add some hot glue and start wrapping it around that entire stem to cover it. So I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm not being super careful about making sure it is completely covered because I knew I wanted to come back down on it to make it thicker. So if you want to just go up once, you can, or you can come down. I just like the look of a thicker pumpkin stem for this, so that's what I did. Now to decorate this pumpkin, I'm going to use some of this berry garland or pitberry vine, whatever you want to call it. This I picked up from the Dollar Tree last fall, but I have seen it at my Dollar Tree this year already. So I'm going to do some of the red and orange and then some of the green and white. And I'll just twist those around a paintbrush, and that finishes off this pumpkin. I love how whimsical and cute this one is. For this DIY, I wanted to create something a little more elegant, so I painted the base of my pumpkin white, and now I'm going to go in with some tulle, and I thought that this blue tulle was so pretty. It has a little bit of a glitter sheen to it. I really don't know where I picked this one up. Probably Walmart, but I'm not 100%. But I do know that the Dollar Tree does carry tulle now, so keep your eyes open at your Dollar Tree if you can't get to a Walmart, but I know Walmart carries tulle as well, and you just want to cut off a section and then you're just going to pull it up and squish it down into the middle there of that pumpkin. Now I wanted to make sure that this was secure, so I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue, and then I'm going to put in an original stem right down into that hot glue, and that's just going to make sure that everything is nice and secure. And then I will paint that top silver. And then I added some lace to the sides there. I kind of cut them at an oval shape. And then I'm going to add a lace bow to the top. Now I had this button in my stash. I painted it silver. And I'm going to add that to the middle of my bow. But you can add any bling you want. Now, I don't know what happened to the footage, but I did also add some of these gems that are all on the same strand from the Dollar Tree. They're just stickers. I just added those in there and added some lamb's ear, and that finished that one off. All right, we are moving on. I have one of these velvet pumpkins that I picked up, I think last year from the Dollar Tree. I've seen them again this year in different colors, but I have this green, and I pulled the stem out. I had to use my heat gun to get it out. It was glued in there pretty well. And then when I pulled it out, some of the fabric came out too. So I'm just going to glue that down and then poke it in to the top again. So I had this doily that actually belonged to my husband's grandma. I believe that she crocheted it, and so I wanted to be very delicate and preserve this doily because it is special, hand-me-down, and I think it's beautiful. So I didn't want to damage it in any way. So I'm not gluing my stem into my pumpkin. I just set it in there. And then I'm going to pull the doily down and use straight pins to secure the doily onto my pumpkin. So if you have a doily that you don't care about, or it's not special to you, you can glue it down if you want. But I'm just using one of these, these straight pins with these little pearls on them. And I think that just gives it a really pretty touch. But I'm just going to pull it down and secure it as I need around. And I think that a round doily would work best for this kind of a project, but you can try any kind of doily you want. Just remember that if you are using a handmade doily, that somebody spent a lot of time making that. I know, because I'm a crocheter and I know exactly how long it takes to make something like this. So I just definitely want to preserve the beauty and not ruin all that time spent making it. But of course, you can do what you want with your doilies. So I'm going to add some of this wired jute twine to my stem, curl it up, and then I had this really pretty little gold key in my stash, and I thought it would look pretty on there, kind of vintage, and just give it a little extra sparkle and shine. So this is just a charm, like a necklace charm. So you can get it like Walmart or Michael's or any craft store, but I just love that little added touch, and I think that this is so vintage and so chic. So this pumpkin is actually not a foam pumpkin. It is one of the kind of plaster pumpkins. It did have a couple of spots on it that were painted funny. I'm using a sanding block to make it all smooth. And then I am going to give it a coat, actually probably 2 coats of the Waverly chalk paint in white. And then I'll let that dry thoroughly. Once that's dry, I'm going to use some of these rub-on transfers from the Dollar Tree. I found these blue ones. I thought they were gorgeous, and so I cut some out. My tip, because this is a rounded shape, is to cut out the individual leaves. So they're kind of in clusters. I cut them out individually eventually and added them in smaller areas. So I covered the whole entire pumpkin, but I did do it in smaller sections of the rub-on transfer, if that makes any sense. And if you do this project, you'll understand what I'm talking about if you try that. So that's just a little tip that I figured out while I was doing this project. So I'm going to create a bow. I am just using some satin ribbon that I had in my stash that was kind of the same color blue. And I'm going to cut off a length, make it into an awareness ribbon, and then pinch down the middle. And then I'll secure that with a little bit of wire. This is wire that I've pulled out of wired ribbon when I didn't need the wire in it. And I just kind of saved that wire, and it's perfect for little projects like this. So I'll do the blue satin ribbon, and then I do this white sheer ribbon that is from the Dollar Tree in the exact same way. I just made it a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to layer them together, and I am just going to kind of wrap that wire from that back bow around just to secure it lightly. I will secure it better with a little bit of smaller ribbon here in the middle, hot glue it to the back, wrap it around twice, and then hot glue it again. And that just makes sure that those are stuck together really well, and it finishes off that front and makes it look beautiful. So I'll just hot glue that and then trim off any ends there. And then I'm going to cut my ribbons at an angle. And I'll use a little bit of a lighter flame just to make sure that I am burning those edges just a little bit so that they do not fray. And then I'll add that to the top of my pumpkin. As you can see, I've got all the rub-on transfers on this pumpkin. It looks beautiful. And I decided to leave this stem as it was. I liked the look of that. But if you want to change up the color of your stem, you definitely can do that. And then I'll just find the perfect spot that I want my bow, and I'll hot glue that on. This project is so simple and so easy, but turns out gorgeous. I can imagine a whole entire tablescape of these types of pumpkins. Oh, they would be gorgeous. For this DIY, we're going to use one of these burlap pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. I'm never really super fond of these pumpkins. They're okay, but I definitely want to dress this one up. So I'm going to take some strips of fabric. You can use any fabric you want. It is cut anywhere between 1 inch and 2 inches. And all you're going to do is you're going to twist each individual length of fabric. Couldn't think. Fabric, you're just going to twist it around, and then you're going to secure it to your pumpkin. So I am going to secure the bottom of my pumpkin, like all of the strands to the bottom of the pumpkin, with hot glue, but I will poke up the, and actually you see me poking it in there, but I'm going to poke everything into the middle on the top, but I do end up hot gluing most of it down on the bottom. Just kind of be conscious as you're wrapping your fabric around that you are kind of keeping it even on the bottom. So however you need to do that, just make sure that you're cutting it so that everything kind of comes down into the middle and then it sits nicely. And then you're just going to change your strips of fabric. So you want to make sure that you get fabric that isn't the same next to each other. Just change it up. And there's lots of different fabric options at the Dollar Tree and at Walmart in fun fall patterns. So definitely be on the lookout for that if you want to do this project. Now, some of the areas you need a little bit of fabric. It doesn't quite cover, and it doesn't make sense to go all the way from the top to the bottom. So just start at that, wherever that section is that is open, and then add a little bit of fabric to it. Hot glue it down, and then twist your fabric like normal and hot glue it down to the bottom. And that's how you fill in those little extra spaces that are kind of funky. And if you do this project, you'll understand what I'm talking about when you get to that point. So as you can see, I did like 4 corners, kind of sectioned it off, and then I just kind of worked in each of those sections. And this is a little tiny bit time consuming. Definitely put on a YouTube video or your favorite TV show while you're doing this project, and time will fly by. And when you're done with this project, it is so cute, so rustic, so farmhouse, and I just think it is adorable. So to finish this one off, I did a regular stem on it, added a little bit of fabric around the top for some leaves, and then added one of these laser cut die things from the Dollar Tree. I brushed it with a little bit of white paint and then added it with some jute twine. And I love how this one turns out. All right, so this pumpkin is again one of the velvet pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. Pulled out that stem and all the fabric wanted to come out. So I am just working on making sure that I get that fabric back in. And actually, I like it better because I was able to pull that fabric even tighter than it was originally. So I think it looks even better. And even if you don't end up doing any kind of decorations with these kind of fabric pumpkins, or these velvet pumpkins, I should say, not the fabric ones, the velvet ones that have the foam underneath, you might want to go ahead and do this because it just makes it look even better. But I am just going to poke that all back in, and then I'm going to add a stem, one of those stems from that big pick of hydrangeas. Again, you can use a stick or any kind of whatever you want to put in there, you can do. And then I'm just going to wrap it with the white jute twine from Walmart. Now for this part, I am going to use these glass beads from the Crafter Square section. There are 4 different sizes, and this works out perfect. So I'm going to start at the top with the largest size, and I'm going to keep them nice and close together. I'm going to go around the whole entire stem right next to each other so they're really super tight. And then I'm going to start kind of spreading them out and down. So you're just going to keep hot gluing. You can add these with thread if you want to, but I am just using some hot glue here, and I'm just going to start kind of spacing them out and working them down the pumpkin. And as I run out of sizes, I'm going to move down to the next size and keep going. So you'll see what I do here in just a minute. Now, as you can see, they are just a little more spread out as you get smaller. And this pumpkin looks so elegant to me, and literally like $2 and maybe like 20 cents to make this pumpkin. It is unbelievable how pretty this pumpkin turns out. So I have some leaves. I painted them with gold paint, and I'm just going to hot glue them to the top. These are just leaves from a vine strand, probably from the Dollar Tree. And then I have this thin wire. You can use any thin wire you want, any color you want. The green floral wire would work perfect for this, but this one just happens to be kind of a brass color. Had it in my stash, but you can get these smaller wires from any craft store like Michael's or Joann's. And I just wrapped it around a skewer to make it curly, and then I'll cut off a couple different sections and glue them to the top of my pumpkin as well. Then to finish it off, I had a little bit of gold ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I created a regular bow with it, dovetailed those ends, and glued that to the front. And look at how beautiful and elegant this pumpkin is. This would be gorgeous on your Thanksgiving tablescape. All right, we've come to the end. This is the last pumpkin. This is the easiest one. Painted one of those pumpkins white with chalk paint, and then I'm going to go in with that Chanel yarn that you can get at the Dollar Tree. They are carrying lots of different colors. I picked up white. I thought that would be really pretty, but I think that this would be fun to do in like black, white, and gray. You could do a whole bunch of different ones in that kind of same color scheme. Add some buffalo check fabric pumpkins, and what a tablescape that would make. So I'm just going to keep wrapping this around until it's completely covered, just like you see. And then I'm going to add a couple of beads onto some jute twine, tie up the end, and then create a bow. And then I am going to add in another bead on the other side. And then I'm going to glue that to the stem that I made from some of the jute twine or the nautical rope from the Dollar Tree. And that'll finish off this pumpkin. Super easy, simple, and very fast for this one. If you're on social media, I am over on Instagram, and I also host a Facebook group page with my friend Lisa from Our Gray House. We have lots of friends sharing tons of inspiration, and we'd love to see you there too. I hope that you were inspired or found something new with this video today. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I'd love for you to subscribe and stick around. Also, make sure you go check out the collaboration link. It's going to be so many fun projects for you from very talented ladies. I hope you go check it out. I hope you have a happy, healthy, and blessed day, and we'll see you next time. Bye!